Meghan Markle has never been a member. I don't know if she's become a member now, but she had been working for Soho House since at least 2005.
It began with a photograph, a simple one, taken years before anyone knew the names that would soon dominate headlines. Prince Harry sat alone in his study, sorting through piles of old clippings and digital folders, when he noticed something that made his pulse slow. In the corner of one image, half hidden behind a champagne glass, was a small navy blue bag stamped with a crest, Soho House International. It wasn't remarkable at first, just another photo from Meghan's early years. But then he started to see it again, and again. In different cities, at different times, the same logo appeared like a ghost following her through time. According to the official story, their fairy tale began in 2016, a blind date in London arranged by a mutual friend, followed by late-night drinks and quiet laughter. Within weeks, the world had its new royal couple. The press called it destiny, a modern romance that defied tradition. But the truth behind that meeting wasn't so simple. It didn't begin with fate.
So Jessica Mulroney introduced her to Marcus Anderson in Toronto.
It began with a network, a private one, a members-only club called Soho House. Soho House wasn't just another bar or restaurant. It was a global web of elite meeting spots, half lounge, half strategy room, connecting the rich, the famous, and the ambitious. Founded by Nick Jones in 1995, it prided itself on exclusivity. You didn't apply to join. You were invited. The people who gathered there weren't random. They were curated. Every connection had purpose. Every introduction had potential. And somewhere in the middle of that world, Meghan Markle was slowly making her way up. Back in 2005, long before Suits, Meghan was already involved with Soho House circles in Toronto. She wasn't a member. She was working around the brand, helping with events, mingling with clients, and learning how the system worked. That world ran on proximity. If you could stay close to the right names, doors opened without anyone noticing. One of those names was Marcus Anderson, a senior consultant for Soho House who specialized in connecting people who could mutually benefit from each other. Marcus was smart, charming, and well-connected. He wasn't famous, but he was known. Insiders called him the Quiet Architect because he built bridges between powerful people and rising faces. When Meghan moved to Toronto for Suits, she met another key figure, stylist Jessica Mulroney, who was already part of Canada's social elite. Jessica introduced Meghan to Marcus, and from there the connections multiplied. Private dinners, curated events, and charity galas all centered around the same few faces. By the time Meghan met Harry, Marcus had already been in her life for years. When People magazine later confirmed that Harry and Meghan's first date took place at Soho House in London, it raised quiet eyebrows among those who knew how that network worked. Marcus helped set up that meeting. It wasn't at a palace or a gala. It was in a private corner of a members-only club. No cameras, no leaks, no record. From there, the story we all know unfolded. 2 dates in London, a trip to Botswana, then months later, the engagement. To the public, it was a whirlwind romance. But behind the scenes, the same names kept appearing. Marcus Anderson, Nick Jones, and others tied to Soho House. Years later, in the quiet halls of Frogmore Cottage, Harry began piecing the pattern together. What he found disturbed him. There were archived blog posts describing Soho House events in Istanbul, Madrid, and Toronto between 2014 and 2016, all listing Meghan as an attendee. He saw guest lists filled with bankers, heirs, diplomats, and film producers. He noticed something else, too. The same people funding his charity initiatives were appearing beside Meghan in older photos. It was overlap, not coincidence. Each connection felt like a missing puzzle piece snapping into place. He didn't want to believe it at first. He told himself it was normal. Everyone in those circles knew each other. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that his love story might have been mapped out long before he ever walked into that room in 2016. The deeper he looked, the harder it became to separate coincidence from curation. To outsiders, Soho House was just a chic escape for celebrities and executives. But insiders knew it as a social machine, one that quietly shaped careers, headlines, and relationships. It was where introductions were arranged, deals sealed, and reputations rebuilt. You didn't join for drinks. You joined for access. And Meghan understood that better than anyone. As Harry studied photo after photo, a pattern emerged. Every milestone, from the blind date to the engagement party, even to their 2018 wedding, had a Soho House connection. The founder, Nick Jones, attended their wedding. The Amsterdam branch hosted their post-wedding getaway. The club's consultants appeared as guests and coordinators at royal-adjacent events. For Harry, that was too many coincidences. He began to wonder whether his entire love story had been guided by invisible hands. Still, he wasn't angry. Not yet. More than anything, he was conflicted. Because love and truth don't cancel each other out. They collide. He thought back to how Meghan had described their first meeting as destiny, how she'd said everything just aligned, and for a moment, he wondered if she meant it literally. What unsettled him most wasn't the connection itself, but how carefully it had been hidden. The media never mentioned Meghan's early ties to the club. They painted her as an outsider, a Hollywood actress stepping into royal tradition. But the truth was, she'd been circulating in those elite networks long before Harry ever appeared. She wasn't new to that world. She was already part of it. As the night dragged on, Harry sat surrounded by open files and photographs. He saw the same faces again and again. Men and women who seemed to appear like clockwork at every major turning point of his life. It wasn't proof of manipulation, but it was proof of design. The fairy tale that the world adored might not have been built on fate after all. It might have been built on access. He closed his laptop and leaned back, staring into the dark. Maybe it didn't matter. Maybe love was still love, even if it began in a room full of calculated introductions. But deep down, he knew something had shifted. Every story he'd been told about his own life now had a question mark attached, and that was just the beginning. Because the more he looked, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about a photo or a club. It was about an entire network that had been quietly shaping his world for nearly a decade. And as he started tracing those connections back to their source, he realized he was standing on the edge of something much bigger than a marriage. He was uncovering the machinery behind a modern royal fairy tale. And what he found next would change everything he thought he knew about destiny, loyalty, and truth. When the headlines called it a fairy tale, Harry wanted to believe them. He needed to. For years, he'd carried the image of his mother, Diana, trying to find love under the weight of tradition and control. Meeting Meghan had felt like a second chance for both of them. A moment where emotion finally triumphed over duty. But sitting there in the dim light of Frogmore Cottage, surrounded by photos and guest lists, that image began to fracture. The more he learned about the network around Meghan, the less it looked like fate, and the more it looked like architecture. The pattern wasn't subtle anymore. He could trace it. Names, events, places, all leading back to the same circle. There was Marcus Anderson, ever present at every milestone. There was Jessica Mulroney, the stylish gatekeeper of Toronto's high society. And there was Nick Jones, the founder of Soho House, who had gone from hosting private parties to attending their royal wedding. It wasn't random. It was a web, and every thread tied back to the same brand, Soho House International. The first major crack appeared when Harry revisited Meghan's timeline between 2014 and 2016. She had been filming Suits in Toronto, but during those same years, she had attended private gatherings in Istanbul, Madrid, and Barcelona, all organized by Soho House. The events were described in old blog posts as exclusive nights for elite creatives. The guest lists read like a who's who of influence, CEOs, ambassadors and heirs. These were not random parties. They were opportunities, and Meghan was on every list. When Harry compared those names to the financial donors supporting his royal charity work, he noticed the overlap. It wasn't just one or two. It was several. The same people who had written checks for his foundation were attending dinners with Meghan years before they ever met. That discovery hit him harder than he expected. It wasn't proof of manipulation, but it blurred the line between chance and intent. How could so many connections exist before their story even began? He began to understand that Soho House wasn't just a social club. It was a global introduction system. The people who ran it, people like Marcus, didn't just host events. They curated careers. They paired ambition with opportunity. Meghan had learned how that system worked early on. She wasn't the first to use it, and she wouldn't be the last. But she was the one who used it best. That realization brought Harry to a painful question. Had their blind date ever been blind? The more he looked, the less it seemed like coincidence. A mutual friend had arranged it, yes, but that friend was a longtime member of Soho House London. Meghan had attended multiple private dinners at that same location in the months before they met. The table where they reportedly had their first date was often reserved for high-profile introductions. Even their follow-up meetings in Toronto and Amsterdam took place at Soho House locations. By 2018, the connection was public. The couple attended the Amsterdam opening of Soho House's newest branch. It was hosted by Nick Jones himself. To outsiders, it was just another event, another appearance by the royal couple. But to insiders, it was something deeper, a full-circle moment. The place where their story began was now part of their shared identity. What made it more complex was Marcus Anderson's ongoing role. He wasn't just a friend. He traveled with Meghan, helped coordinate events, and even appeared in the background of early royal functions. To the press, he was a close confidant. But within social circles, he was something else entirely. The invisible thread tying Meghan's world to Harry's. As Harry dug deeper, he found inconsistencies that gnawed at him. Financial statements showed that Meghan's travel between 2014 and 2016 didn't match her known income as an actress. Some invoices hinted at sponsorships or corporate coverage, meaning someone else may have been paying. He reached out to a few old acquaintances for clarification. Most refused to speak. One finally replied with a single warning, "Don't dig too deep. That world protects its own." That line stayed with him. That world protects its own. It explained why the media never reported on Meghan's deeper ties. It explained why every journalist who tried to look into the story dropped it quietly. It explained how a narrative so polished could exist without cracks for so long. The press saw a modern love story. But behind that story was a network powerful enough to control what the public saw, and what it didn't. Inside the palace, tension grew. Harry had begun pulling away, questioning not just his wife's past, but the machine that had shaped both of their lives. The same system that had once embraced Diana was now spinning a new image, this time with Meghan at its center. For years, Harry had wanted freedom from that world. But now, he realized freedom wasn't about escaping the monarchy. It was about escaping the web that had pulled him into a story he never fully understood. The realization came late one night. He stared at an old invitation card embossed with the Soho House crest. He thought about every time Meghan had said their meeting was destiny. Maybe she truly believed it. Maybe she didn't. He'd never know for sure. What he did know was that their relationship wasn't born from random sparks or fate's hand. It was the result of careful introductions, curated access, and a world that thrived on invisible deals. But love, no matter how it starts, changes everything. Harry still loved her. That was the painful part. Even after all the doubts, all the questions, he couldn't turn that off. What he struggled with was trust. Because when trust breaks, it doesn't shatter loudly. It fades piece by piece until silence feels safer than answers. He stopped looking through old photos after that night. He didn't want to find more. He realized that digging deeper wouldn't change the past. It would only change how he saw it. Still, he couldn't escape the truth. Their beginning had been written long before he ever knew it existed. In public, the fairy tale continued. Red carpets, interviews, global applause. But behind the smiles there was distance. Quiet, unspoken distance. Harry had started to see the price of believing in perfect stories. And in that realization, he finally understood something his mother had once said. Nothing is ever as it seems. The web around them wasn't just social. It was strategic. The people who built it didn't care about love or loyalty. They cared about access, influence, and image. Harry had become a part of that machinery without even realizing it. And yet, as the world cheered their new beginning, Harry was already asking himself the question that would haunt him for years. Was it love? Or was it a setup that had worked better than anyone could have planned? The moment of truth didn't arrive in a headline. It came quietly, late one evening, when Harry walked past Meghan's study and noticed the familiar crest again, a Soho House envelope resting on the edge of her desk. For a second, he just stood there staring at it. It wasn't guilt or anger that he felt. It was exhaustion. Every time he thought he had moved past it, the same logo, the same circle, found its way back into their lives. Meghan turned from her laptop, smiling like nothing was wrong. She asked if he was okay. He said yes, but he wasn't. He couldn't be. Too many unanswered questions had piled up between them, questions he didn't even know how to ask anymore. How do you tell the person you love that you're starting to doubt the story of how you met? He walked outside and stood under the cold English night. The gardens of Frogmore Cottage were silent. For the first time, he realized that the silence wasn't peaceful. It was hollow. He had everything he thought he wanted. Love, freedom, a family. But underneath it all was the same unease that had followed him since that night he found the first photo. The next few months were tense. Meghan kept working, traveling, and building her projects. Harry attended royal meetings, smiled for cameras, and tried to act normal. But something had shifted. Every time she mentioned old friends from Toronto or upcoming dinners in Los Angeles, that small doubt flickered again. It wasn't jealousy, it was mistrust. He couldn't shake the feeling that there were things she'd never told him, parts of her past that had been carefully edited before she entered his world. Inside the palace, whispers grew. Staff noticed their distance. Some said Harry had become more withdrawn, others that he had lost his sense of belonging. Friends tried to comfort him, telling him not to overthink. But deep down, Harry knew he had uncovered something larger than just a relationship issue. It was a system, a network that crafted public images and controlled access to power. And somehow, he had become one of its stories. One evening, he decided to confront it head-on. He asked Meghan directly about Marcus, about the events, about how much she had known before they met. Her expression changed, calm but careful. She said he was reading too much into it, that everyone in entertainment had mutual friends, and that Soho House was just a social club, nothing more. She said love doesn't need proof. But Harry wasn't sure anymore if love was enough without truth. He wanted to believe her. He really did. But the facts didn't disappear. They sat between them, invisible but heavy. He realized that the hardest part wasn't the possibility of deception. It was the idea that maybe she had never needed to deceive him at all, because the entire system had already done the work for her. As time passed, their life changed. They stepped back from royal duties. They left the UK. They tried to rebuild somewhere quieter, far from the press and the institutions that once defined them. But distance didn't erase the past. The same faces from that old network kept appearing, now in different settings, at business meetings, at Hollywood events, at charity launches. It was as if the same world that had introduced them refused to let go. For Harry, the move to California wasn't an escape. It was a pause, a chance to breathe, to reset, to stop digging into old files. But even there, under the California sun, reminders still appeared. The same names sponsoring new projects, the same brands funding partnerships, the same quiet power behind the curtain. He began to wonder if freedom was even possible in their world. Maybe every path was designed. Maybe every connection, every opportunity, came with invisible strings. The realization hurt, but it also woke him up. He stopped trying to rewrite the past. Instead, he started paying attention to how stories are built. Not just his, but everyone's. How fame, influence, and image can weave together until truth becomes optional. The years that followed were quieter but not easier. They built a new life, a new image, and tried to move on from the chaos. Yet that early discovery never really left him. Sometimes when Meghan spoke about destiny, or how the universe brought them together, he'd smile. But deep down, a small part of him still questioned whether it was destiny or design. What happened after wasn't scandalous. It was human. They grew apart in ways most couples do, just under brighter lights. They learned that truth doesn't always destroy. Sometimes it just changes how you see everything. The fairy tale wasn't fake, but it wasn't perfect either. It was built on chance, ambition, and timing. And maybe that's all any modern fairy tale really is. Years later, long after the noise had faded, Harry would still keep that old photo, the one with the navy blue bag and the crest that started it all. He never showed it to anyone. He didn't need to. It was just a reminder that every story has layers, and some truths stay hidden not because they're dark, but because people aren't ready to face them. In the end, Harry stopped looking for villains. He stopped asking who planned what. He realized that the truth wasn't about betrayal. It was about understanding the systems that shape people before they even meet. Meghan's past wasn't a crime. It was survival in a world where connections decide your future. He still loved her, even after everything. But the kind of love that remained was quieter, less about fairy tales, more about acceptance. Acceptance that destiny and design often walk hand in hand, that even the purest stories can be built from strategy, and that sometimes the truth doesn't destroy the dream, it just makes it real. The world still sees them as the couple who defied the crown. But behind that image are two people who learned, painfully and publicly, that love stories aren't written by fate alone. They're shaped by choices, by timing, and by the networks that connect us all. So maybe Meghan didn't hide a secret. Maybe she just hid how much of their story was never really a mystery, just a plan waiting to happen. The fairy tale didn't end with betrayal or revenge. It ended with understanding. Harry learned that truth isn't always pure, and love isn't always blind. It's just complicated, and maybe that's what makes it real.